All right. So I'll introduce myself from the podium. It's my first time doing this. Hello, my name is Kevin. I'm pretty sure all of you already know me. And the topic that I ended up getting for this next 3 weeks, we're going to be going over is called pressing toward the mark. Essentially, like, reaching your goals, going for those dreams and aspirations that you have. And then the subtopic for today is going to be refusing to be deterred. So, by a show of hands, who here has ever felt like they doubted themselves? They felt desanimados with anything that they've ever done? Everybody, right? So it's interesting because if you could go to the next slide, please. So did King David. King David, as we know, we've learned about him at church constantly, that he was a righteous man, or at least as righteous as a human could be. That he was a man after God's own heart, and he tried to mold his heart, chasing after whatever pleased the Lord. While he was in his youth becoming the king that he ended up becoming, he also ended up facing doubt. He also faced circumstances where he was being deterred. The book explains. I'm sick, so that's why I wanted to keep it on. Sorry. The book explains that his brother, in essence, called him a show-off and kind of like a cocky young kid, just because he showed up and he was trying to assess the situation as to why there was a Philistine calling out God's army. David responded by telling him that he's not going to pay attention to what he's saying. Sort of like, well, I would imagine the fights that I have with my little brother, like, oh, like I can't weigh in my 2 cents, I can't see I can't say what's on my mind. The book itself later goes on to explain that what he was essentially doing was he was putting aside that deterrent. Like, he wasn't letting the seeds of doubt being planted. And if they were being planted, he was removing them as soon as possible. He also ended up facing doubt, or the seeds of doubt, when he ended up talking with King Saul. And if you go to the next slide, please. I ended up taking this out from the Bible, which says, David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Saul replied, "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth." This is from 1 Samuel chapter 17, from verses 32 to 33. While reading this, to be honest, it kind of felt like the situation that I feel most people go through when they get out of college. How many of you have tried applying to a job and have said that it's an entry-level position, but have said that you need certain X amount of years of experience, and so on and so forth? Exactly, right? From like an entry-level position. So this sort of felt like, because you're young, because you're inexperienced, you can't do this or you can't do that. I'm pretty sure a lot of you have like had your doubts as you're going through college. I know that I have, with the major that I was choosing, if I was choosing a right one, if I was going to do this in the future, if I was going to end up being like those other people that got a major and then ended up doing something else completely different. Right now I'm pursuing something that's different from what my major was, but all the positions that are asking for degrees and certifications and experience that I don't have. And it's sort of like, again, doing the thing of, well, you're young, you're inexperienced, we're looking for somebody who wants a little bit more. And while I was reading this, if you move on over to the next slide, this other verse came up to mind, which is from 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 12. It says, "Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity." And I feel that being young, yes, it has its advantages and its disadvantages, but I feel like it's more advantageous than anything. Like, yeah, we're going to have people looking down on us because we're young, we're inexperienced, and that's going to cause seeds of doubt. But at the same time, this sort of leads into the fact of it's not really what our abilities and capabilities are. Us as Christians, believing in the Word of God and knowing that we're saved, know that through Him we have an avenue to do anything that He wants us to do. If you go over to the next slide, please. So in our lives, we're going to end up obviously facing doubt. The book explains, and I agree through classes that I've taken in college, that sometimes the doubt that we receive from others and the deterrence that we receive from others are actually their own, it's a reflection of their own insecurities. I don't remember the phrase that it goes, but I think it's lazy people don't like seeing successful people around them or somebody else being successful. it sort of creates their own insecurities and showing them that they're lacking in certain things, and they don't like seeing stuff like that. If you ask most successful people, I don't remember which celebrity it is right now, but there is a quote that they said that they surround themselves with successful people because successful people will try to push you to go forward, whereas somebody who's been failing is going to try to hold you back. Try to keep this in mind when you come across people that, that try to put those seeds of doubt in you, knowing that most of the time they're going through their own struggles and their own issues as well, and they'd rather see somebody else fail because it would make them feel a little bit better about themselves. Sadly, this could also come from the people around you. The book itself also shows that other Christians don't like it when other Christians end up achieving the promises and the goals that were promised to them. I think pastors talked about it sometimes, like, oh, ¿por qué esa hermana va a estar sirviendo? ¿Por qué ese hermano va a estar predicando antes que yo? Sorry. So it sort of comes from that, even us as Christians are human and we're flawed. And as they try to put you those seeds of doubt, I would say just try to hold yourself back to not, let it affect you, but at the same time, not let you have a negative outlook on people that tend to do that as well. And yes, while this does plant seeds of doubt, it's better to remove a seed than it is to nurture it and let it grow. At the end of the day, it's still just a seed. Somebody could just say something like, oh, I don't like the way that you sing. I don't like the way that you walk, or something like that. You could just brush it off and just ignore it. Or you could start nurturing that seed, start paying more attention to it, starts floating around in your head. It ends up growing into a root, and then a root ends up growing into a tree, and then you start looking at yourself and you're like, oh, maybe I do kind of walk a little bit funny, or maybe I do sing a little bit like I have a sore throat all the time. The book explained, and I think that it's also perfect in essence to sort of summarize, is, if you have a calling, which I'm pretty sure all of us does, if we don't have it now, then we're going to have it in the future, of something that God called us to do. God doesn't call people that are qualified. God calls people that he wants, that are open to be moved and to be molded into the way that he wants you to. And the 12 disciples that he called, some of them already had skills that were translated into the roles that they had. Judas was a tax collector, so he was converted as a treasurer. Or Peter was a fisherman, so he turned out to be a fisher of man. Others, they were molded into the roles that they had, and they ended up being great examples of spreading the gospel and the ministry throughout the ancient world. I'm pretty sure without them we wouldn't all be able to have the same experience with Christianity as we do right now. And again, most of them weren't qualified to do the things that they were to do. The Apostle Paul was pursuing people, was killing and pursuing Christians, and God turned him around. So I just think that that's just important to remember. And I know that that was really short, but that's all that I had today.